Welcome to another episode of the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo, the podcast where we delve into the mystery of Scooby-Doo media, getting clues from people who helped bring our favorite mystery-solving dog to life on various platforms, and maybe eating some Scooby snacks along the way. I'm your host, Alexa Lawler.
Scooby-Doo, where are you?
And it would have been mine if it hadn't been for those meddling kids.
Gang, we've just been handed our next mystery.
Blasted meddling kids.
Today we're talking to animation historian Jerry Beck, author of the Hanna-Barbera Treasury and the Insight Editions Scooby-Doo mini-book, to name two of his many animation-focused books. Jerry also runs the Cartoon Research blog and was interviewed in the Scooby-Doo Where Are You Now TV special. Jerry's love and appreciation for animation is very apparent in the work that he's done across his career, and I think is also quite apparent in his responses to my questions in the interview. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Jerry.
I'm happy to be here. Love Scooby-Doo.
I, as well, of course, love Scooby-Doo. If you're up for it, I like to start off with 3 questions of Scooby-Doo related trivia.
I don't know if I'm up for it, but go for it. Let's try it.
For question 1, which of the following is not an episode title from Scooby-Doo Where Are You?
Okay.
A. Foul Play in Funland. B. The Ghostly Creep from the Deep. Or C. A Gaggle of Galloping Ghosts.
Wow, they all sound like real titles from the show. Well, I'll risk it all and just take a wild guess. I have to tell you, I don't know. I would say the third one is the least sounding like something from the season, but it could. So I'm going to say number 3, the Galloping Ghosts, or whatever that was, whatever you said there.
It's actually B. The Ghostly Creep from the Deep is a new Scooby-Doo movies episode.
You see, you've tricked me.
And for question 2, can you name 3 famous Scooby-Doo villains?
Oh no. Oh, I mean, see, you're even gonna edit this part out of your interview. I mean, it's the banker, the librarian, and the mayor of a town. I mean, I don't really have any names of the villains. So sorry. I'm really not up on this.
That's totally fine. I find that one's a hard one. Not many people can name a couple of villains.
You mean actual names of the characters of the villains? Yeah, okay, yeah. Let me explain to the audience. Okay, I'm an animation historian. What does that mean? I'm a guy who loved Looney Tunes, Disney cartoons, the old cartoons that I grew up with, and watched Saturday Morning in the 60s, watched the very beginning of Scooby-Doo when it first went on. Big fan of it in the first season, despite my non-answers of some of those questions. But then I saw the copycat shows that not only Hanna-Barbera did, and other studios and other networks, and Scooby-Doo never went off. It just kept going on and under different titles, or new characters are added and all that. So Scooby was always there, and I always gave it a watch. When the new movies started being made, I watched the first 1 or 2, and I'm like, okay, I like that they. The one thing I kind of like was that they kept the continuity going. It's almost reassuring, that Scooby-Doo, no matter how much they change it, it still ends with the meddling kids, and there's something about the whole kabuki ritual of a Scooby-Doo episode that I really, really like and enjoy. That said, and I might be jumping ahead here. I don't know the episode titles, but I was a big fan of that Mystery Incorporated series they did, which I thought was the best, but that's my taste. I also like the pup named Scooby-Doo because they tried to be a little more Looney Toony in that one. So I'm familiar with the show, but in the big picture of what I do, I've written books. I write about a lot of things. I did a Hanna-Barbera book or two. Scooby is just a part of it, up there with the Smurfs and Flintstones and everything else. So you have to understand, I have to weigh it all, and it's all gotten too far ahead of me as something to keep on top of with every episode. But Scooby has become an icon, and pardon me for just going on and rambling, but that's what I kind of do. But Scooby in history, in the history meaning, how many years has it been? 60 years? Holy moly, something like that. Over 60 years now. Wow, is it, or is it 50 years? I mean, in all of that time, there is no denying that Scooby-Doo has become a iconic. I don't want to use these words, but franchise brand. But it's become an iconic. The characters, the series, what happens on it. I love the fact that even though they have that repetitious trapping. The characters, the settings, the usual conclusion. Uh, Again, like I say, it's refreshing. It's familiar, and in a comforting way to watch an episode of Scooby Doo, and I think and they're there for us to look at, and the fact that they still make them, they still make new Scooby Doos. I mean, is pretty amazing. I think one reason, by the way, I'm going on. You can edit your questions in to what I'm saying, my ramble, but I think one reason that they continue, or that they even what's the word, the popularity endured, was when the Cartoon Network started, and they started running the old Scooby-Doo's next to Bugs Bunny and Popeye and Daffy Duck and the Flintstones, and they found within a month or two. I still remember this because I was around there. I was actually an advisor to the Cartoon Network, but I remember really early on, and certainly I'm going to say within a month or two, but by a year into it, 2 years into it, Scooby was getting ratings. The ratings were much higher on Scooby-Doo than other things. I don't know why, but I mean, they had such a plethora of great animation on that channel, but Scooby was the thing, and so ultimately there became a time it was a joke before they started doing new animation. They were running all their old thing, and it was becoming a joke amongst my friends that the Cartoon Network was turning into the Scooby-Doo channel. It was kind of not unlike today. If you turn on Nickelodeon, 9 times out of 10 you're going to see SpongeBob, because they run SpongeBob like 12 hours out of 24 hours, it seems. And similarly, Scooby was like that on the Cartoon Network for a while, and it being replaced by newer animation didn't stop it. The sales on video, the reason they still make new movies. I don't know how the metrics are gonna work out for the future, but the new movie, they've been making these new movies direct to video, and the only reason they make them, the only reason, is because they sell, is because they make money with them. They know how much they can budget them to make, because they know how much money they're gonna make when they sell them, and so that way they know they're never, they don't lose money on those movies. Plus, they end up being fodder for the Cartoon Network, now HBO Max, and other outlets. And I think it'll be interesting to see if they just keep going. I'm not sure how the metrics are today, since they don't sell them on a per unit basis. Or ratings, like they had on Cartoon Network, was based on advertising and ratings, and all that stuff's out the window with streaming. So it'll be interesting to see how Scooby continues. But the legacy is pretty cemented. Scooby-Doo is pretty much part of the terra firma of Planet Warner Brothers in terms of Bugs Bunny, the Flintstones, and Scooby-Doo. There's no doubt. I mean, someone else could tell me what other character that I'm forgetting that they own the rights to, but Scooby is clearly up there. So there's my speech about Scooby-Doo. What else did you want to ask me?
So the last trivia question that I had
Okay.
is, this book that you had written, true or false?
I did write it.
It came out in 2008.
Yes, I believe. The store, that little mini book was an offshoot of my big Hanna-Barbera book. You'd think I would have that to hold up in front of you. I don't. It's on my bookshelf. But I did a book called the Hanna-Barbera Treasury, and Scooby, of course, is in it. In fact, Scooby is kind of the last, without me looking, I told people before we even started the project, and I've told people since, that the book is pretty much the beginning of Hanna-Barbera up to Scooby-Doo. And then after Scooby-Doo, there's an appendix where we talk about the other things Hanna-Barbera did. But Scooby was the last original show that they did that was a big hit. I mean, they did other big hits after, like the Smurfs, but they didn't create the Smurfs. Smurfs was based on a comic strip, and they've had other things. But Scooby-Doo was the last big original to be a iconic forever, series. So I thought that was a good place to end it because there's still originality. It's a weird way to say that because unfortunately, after Scooby-Doo, the climate of making TV cartoons changed. And the TV networks had more of a say as to what kind of shows they wanted to put on the air. And if they wanted to do a show about, they said, well, I just read Moby Dick over the weekend. Wouldn't it be great if Moby Dick was a secret agent and he was under the water and solving crimes? Well, that sounds insane. But that was something that the networks told Hanna-Barbera, and they gave them a show called Moby Dick, as you may know. And they did many, many shows like that at the whim of the networks, which were completely nutty. The idea of them coming in with an original idea to pitch was very, very, it still happened as the 70s went on, but very few of those original shows, made it to air. Scooby was one of the last of their original ideas that they pitched. And also what I like about Scooby is that it's part of the legacy. As you know, they've had this dog sidekick thing going from the beginning of them starting in TV animation. They had Snuffles, this little dog that was in the Quick Draw McGraw cartoons that back in the 1960 that had that kind of a laugh, and Muttley, with Dick Dastardly and Muttley, and he was this little dog with this snicker. And they had this thing about this dog character. It's almost like Scooby in the forming. And then finally, when they hit Scooby, they got it. It was the Iwo Takamoto design. It was the situation they put the character in, the mystery, the comedy, the whole thing. It all clicked with Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo was there, to me. I know some Hanna-Barbera lovers who will tell me, well, what about Josie and the Pussycats in outer space? I mean, no. Scooby-Doo was the last great thing that they did. In my opinion, not that they didn't have a wonderful career after that. I always like to point out to people that Hanna and Barbera, the studio, unlike outside of the Walt Disney Company, the Hanna-Barbera studio never went out of business. It's technically still in business right now. It's part of Warner Brothers. In their lifetimes, it was still their company, even though they were bought up by Warner's and things, Turner and all that in the later years. They were still running it. And they died running it. And Walt Disney died running his company. And those are the only two I can think of. I mean, almost every other animation studio, in the past, with the ones that are around today, the story is yet to be written. But in the past, Don Bluth, or, just Phil Roman, who was producing The Simpsons and Garfield, went out of business. I mean, all of these companies eventually go out of business, sometimes in horrific ways. And sometimes they just die for whatever business reasons. But Hanna-Barbera never went out of business. So Scooby-Doo was in the middle, in a way, of their, well, maybe more toward the beginning now, but in the middle of their, their factory, their producing of animation. I have friends who put down Scooby, repetitious. I heard all the negatives, but I'm look, I understand what they're saying, and I love classic full animation, and I love Hanna-Barbera, but I will defend Scooby as as the last of his breed, of that type of original show that, and like I said before, I'll end on a repeat note that it was sort of where they were going. It was sort of what they were aiming to do, by having the dog, the kids, the mystery of the things they started with Johnny Quest, the comedy. It's all combined in Scooby-Doo. It's almost like the ultimate Hanna-Barbera production, and I get it. I get it. I'm with you, Scooby fans. I get it completely.
And are there Currently, are there any like animation specific studios that aren't necessarily owned by the big like umbrella companies like Disney or Warner Brothers or something like that?
Let's think about that for a second. That's a great question to ask these days. There are, but are any of them producing something original that they own the rights to? See, we live in a world now where there's a small studio called, well, there's Bento Box that does Bob's Burgers, and I believe many other series, but Bob's Burgers is one of their biggest. They're an independent studio, but you know, technically they're owned, or the shows are bought by Fox or some other company. So do they own that? What do they have assets? Hanna-Barbera was the end of the era of creating something and then owning the asset itself, and I'm not sure if these days, if there's something. I mean, the guys who do Cuphead, Mike, they created that. They're a little studio. They did the video game. Um, and then we live in a world now of Netflix has its own studio, and Amazon has its own studio, and Fox has its own studio. So there are still some small studios like Bento Box. Titmouse is the name of another one, but mainly Titmouse, like the others, do work for the other studios. Titmouse has been doing I think they did the Beavis and Butthead recent revival. They've been doing a lot of the work they do are series that were greenlit by Disney or Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network, and they get the work to do it. It's an independent studio, and they hire a lot of people, but do they own it? You know, so the thing is, yeah, there's independent studios, but it's not the same as it used to be back in the 60s and 70s.
And how have you seen streaming affect animation?
Well, so far its effect is in creating more opportunities for more creators. It's created more work for these studios, not only the big studios, let's say Netflix, but also independent studios. Netflix buys uh, films and ideas from an independent studio, so it does happen. Um, so far the effect is fantastic. In my lifetime, I mean, I was a teenager in the 70s, 1970s, and that was the lowest point. I can say that now, 50 years later, from God, that the 70s was a low point in animation. Walt Disney had died in the 60s. There was no leader, there was no internet, there was no streaming, there was nothing, and animation was sort of falling apart in the 70s. It was very, very cheap, very low budget. I've seen it go from there, and then that lasted about 15 years. And somewhere in the late 80s, animation started to rebound with Little Mermaid, Roger Rabbit, The Simpsons, Pee Wee's Playhouse, Mighty Mouse on CBS. There were a couple of things that brought about this a new change, new blood. And then we had this thing we call the 90s Renaissance, which gave us the Disney movies like Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King and Aladdin, and then suddenly also in the 90s was the emergence of CG with Toy Story and Pixar and other things. So we had an explosion then, and it kept going. There might have been a little recession here and there. I've left out in the 90s Nicktoons, the beginning of original animation for cable. Ren and Stimpy and the Rugrats and all the Dexter's Lab and all that stuff, Powerpuff Girls and on and on and on. That was on Cartoon Network. The So the 90s was this crazy hotbed of creativity and talent. SpongeBob comes out of the 90s, and so does South Park. So does I can't I have to say I can't remember when Family Guy went on, but I want to say it started at late then or so. But the that was a big boom, and then we've kind of floated on that for a while. My point is, now we're back. Now we're in the streaming age, and animation is strong because of the streaming and because of so many outlets for animation and where it can be. And I'm not even talking about commercials and video games and other things. So animation is an industry as it hasn't been before. And I when I was young, when I was a little kid and a teenager, I wanted to be in the animation field, and there was no field. It was closed. It was closed because even though I said there was animation happening in the 70s, all of the old timers were still there. All the people who were doing it in the 40s and 50s were still working in the 70s. They were older, but they were all working at Hanna-Barbera. And I mean, you read the Hanna-Barbera, you read the list of names that are on the original or any of the 1970s Scooby-Doo. it's a who's who of great names of people who worked in classic animation in decades before. It's amazing the talent that worked on that show. So it was very difficult to get in. Cut to today, now I'm teaching animation history at Cal Arts and at UCLA and other schools in California, and there's an industry now. Every school has an animation program. It seems to me, from my little vantage point, and as someone who's written books on animation history, teaching animation history has become a job. I'm so happy that I spent my whole life preparing for it, and there's an industry for the students to go into. There's a trade for them if they choose, or they can go off and be artists, or they can use what their skills in other medium, and not to mention being pre-viz for live action. I mean, there's so many possibilities right now, and it's just I've seen that happen. I've seen it grow in my lifetime, and I'm just delighted with it. And again, I always try to bring it back around for you that Scooby-Doo has been there the whole time. From my life, it's been there from that beginning to it never went away as far as I'm concerned. So it's great that so many other people have picked up on it. I love that they make so much merchandise.
And I would like to take a step back. What's your relationship to Scooby-Doo? You mentioned that you had grown up watching. Did you, religiously watch it on Saturday mornings or?
I did back in 1969, 70 for sure. And in fact, I'm sure I dropped in on it throughout the years, especially when they introduced new characters like Scrappy Doo or things like that. Because, when you're a teenager and that show goes on, it's new in the beginning. But then, yeah, like I mentioned before, there's certain repetition and familiarity in each episode, and then you begin to get it. So you kind of this was me. So it's like okay, I don't kind of need to watch Scooby Doo anymore because it's kind of like I know I see what's happening here. Then personally, for me, outside of the total tonal changes like Pup Named Scooby Doo and Mystery Incorporated, which is much later, but those I would watch. Although they did merchandise Scooby Doo, there were comic books and a few toy items. You may have them. I wonder how you guys consider those prehistoric merchandising efforts. Because it's when the Cartoon Network went on, and as you may know, I don't know how many years this lasted, but there was a period when Cartoon Network went on when Warner Brothers opened a chain of retail stores. The Warner Brothers Studio store was all over the country in all the malls, and it was great. And you missed it. No, it was great because you'd walk in there and be unbelievably cool merchandise on all of the characters. You get a Scooby Doo. You probably have some of it right there. Scooby Doo mugs and everything, T-shirts, and I mean it was so cool. And that's when to me the golden age of Scooby Doo merchandise started. Was around that period, which I guess is the '90s. Yeah, I guess it's the '90s, and then up. But I guess is it pre 1990 Scooby Doo merchandise? Is that the rare merchandise amongst the collectors?
It is for the most part, yeah. Like it's always difficult to get like a full run of that like 1970 comic book series, or like there's always like most of the time you don't even know that things exist until you find it, and then there's like a date that's like 1970 something on it, and it's like what? Like who knew this existed?
Right, right. I mean, I don't even know. I'd love to. I mean, in my imagination, I can assume there was. Besides the comics, let me see. There was probably stuff. There might have been jigsaw puzzles and coloring books. Honestly, I wouldn't. Beyond that, I don't think they did figurines back then. I don't think they might have made some cheap, crappy drugstore toys. They used to. I don't know if that's still a thing anymore, but they used to make these crummy, what I call drugstore toys that you'd only see in drugstores. you know I guess the idea was mom was supposed to buy them for Junior, who's got the mumps at home, and this might make them happy. I'm sure there was a golden book. Was there a gold? There must have been a golden book, a little golden book before 1990. But again, I'd guess that stuff is the higher end on the collectible scale.
Absolutely.
You see, now why would I know this? But that because I kept my eye open for it. But there was, I guess, Gold Key Comics did the original comic book, and I think Charlton Comics did them later. Oh, and then wait a minute, then Marvel did some Scooby comics. That's right. So unless I'm forgetting, those are the only. And then of course DC, of course, later on, because they now own Scooby Doo, they later did Scooby and comics. So they're right there as the history of Scooby-Doo in comics.
And there was an Archie run in the 90s too.
Ah, see, I didn't know that. I didn't even not know. Oh, I gotta see those.
Yeah, I feel like almost every comic company has touched Scooby-Doo at one point.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of the what Mark Evanier. Actually, Scooby was never badly treated in comic books. You'll find Flintstone comics where the art is ugly. You'll find other characters almost, maybe except Disney, even Disney, I can think of some ugly ones where they just didn't care anymore and they just let it go. But for some reason, Scooby always seemed to be drawn by good artists. I know that the Gold Keys at the beginning, they were using some of the real animation artists, and I certainly know the Marvel ones did that too. And I love that. I mean, the people who actually do the cartoons, would make some extra money by doing comics in general, fans don't seem to understand that. There's a certain type of artist that's in my mind right to do print, drawings of these characters. And if you don't do them right, if they're not on model, they don't look good, And in the case of Scooby-Doo, if Scooby doesn't look good, it looks pretty hideously bad because it was really designed a certain way. And but I think Scooby's had a good history with that. I think they've been okay. Let me also mention that a lot of us Hanna-Barbera fans, and this is pictured in my Hanna-Barbera Treasury book, actually enjoy the off-model non-Scooby stuff, like the Flintstones. And when they drew them weird for merchandise, we now can look at it and go, that's kind of funny. That's kind of cool in its way. Barney Rubble with green hair and things like that, where they miscolored everything, and it was horrible when you were a kid at the time, but now it kind of looks cool, So
And I want to talk about your career path a little bit. What was your journey into animation?
finally something I can answer. My journey is just I'm a fan, like you, like anybody. I was a fan, and of course I'm talking to you with my 8-year-old to 15-year-old brain when I say that. I'm a fan of cartoons. I was a fan of comic books. And I wanted to be a cartoonist. I wanted to be an animator. That was my little dream when I was like nearing the end of high school. And what was I going to do with my life? And I drew a lot. And I went to an art school. This is in the 70s, as I mentioned. And I started to really watch not only what was still on TV at that time, but the older cartoons. Why were the Bugs Bunny cartoons like moving better and funnier in some ways? And why was I was getting the jokes in the old Bugs Bunny cartoons and other older cartoons. I was like, hey, this is pretty funny. And I didn't get those jokes before. But as I grew, I was beginning to get these jokes that were in there that were not aimed at kids. They were aimed at adults, it seemed, or even a grown-up audience. So I wanted to know more about those cartoons, but back in the 70s, and I guess I'm fortunate that this was the case, but I was unfortunate because there was nowhere to look any of this information up. There were no books. There was no internet. There was no Wikipedia or IMDb. There was nothing. There was nowhere, anywhere to find out anything about Hanna-Barbera, Bugs Bunny, any of that stuff. So in those years where I was leaving high school and going into the School of Visual Arts in New York, my outside interest in knowing more about these classic cartoons grew and grew and grew, and I ended up doing my own research because there was nowhere else to find out the information. I did fall in with a rough crowd in New York. That rough crowd was a group of like-minded nerds who went to Comic Cons and loved old cartoons. And back then, that was embarrassing. You couldn't tell people you like comic books or cartoons because if you're grown up, because they thought you were backward. And so people don't realize that this Comic Con has 150,000 people. It makes the news. It takes over San Diego. But the early Comic Cons in New York City in 68, 69 into the 70s were almost secret. They were in a hotel and they were up in a ballroom on the top floor. But other than that, you wouldn't know the convention was there. So anyway, I just started to research it on my own. I met a fellow, became my best friend, still is today, Leonard Maltin, who became a big name movie critic and writer about movies and historian himself, and he's still doing that. And he was teaching a little class in the 70s on cartoons. It was an itsy bitsy little class, I paid the couple of $100 tuition to go to the new school for social research was where it was. And there was 10 people in the class. It was a credit thing. I wasn't even enrolled in the school. I just wanted to meet him and hear about animation, what he had to say. We ended up becoming friends from the first day. Everybody else was like really like students in a class. I was like, I had all these questions. I had all these things. I had this enthusiasm. And we ended up working together on a book called Of Mice and Magic, which I have a beaten up copy of right here, but it looks like this, something with the covers falling off it. And I am the it's all up. I am the research associate, it says on the title page of this book. And we work, and this is a history of American animation. We did that during the 1970s and came out in 1980. And from there, we thought we had done it all. We'd figured it out. We have the history down. We made a filmography of every cartoon. We thought we had it, but literally from the day it was published till today, but it doesn't end today. Some new information pops up. Something new in the history of animation occurs. And so I've never stopped. I've written more books. Today I have a blog that's been going for, well, I've been blogging for since the internet started, but the current version of my cartoon research blog, it's cartoonresearch.com, is every single day we have a new blog post by one of my contributors or me, and something new, some new findings, some new information, or even just celebrating that is an anniversary of some classic film. It's taken over my whole life. I got involved. I'll stop soon, but professionally, somebody might be saying, well, how'd you earn a living? How did you make it to your age and live and pay rent? But I was able to sell books later on. But I was also lucky that I fell into movies. I got a job at a movie studio in the 70s at that time, without going into detail, and learned film distribution. I learned something. I learned a trade, and I got into that. And I ended up moving to California in the mid 80s, and actually using my animation knowledge and my newfound film distribution skills. I started a company called Streamline Pictures. This is like in the late 80s into the 90s, and we were one of the first companies to bring over Japanese anime to movie theaters and to video. And I'm talking about films like Akira or Miyazaki's Castle in the Sky and My Neighbor Totoro. We did this before Disney took it over. Disney then took it over later, but our company, Streamline Pictures, you can look that up on Wikipedia. But and then I did that, and I kind of went from there to becoming a film executive at I'm leaving out details, but Nickelodeon and Disney. I was able to work at those companies for a while and write books and teach, and that's my life. That's been my whole life with animation. It's been pretty amazing, and you have to love animation a lot to be an animator, to be an artist. You have to have passion. It has to come from in here. I have that. It just got channeled in a different direction, and I don't regret any of it. That I wanted to be an artist, but I learned this early on, that if the artists don't have support, you can make a great film. I'll give you an example: The Iron Giant as a feature film. Great film. Everybody now knows that. But do people remember that it came out and Warner Brothers didn't support it with distribution? They didn't support it. It was a big bomb. It was a huge bomb. Nobody saw the movie when it came out. It's taken years of it being eventually shown on Cartoon Network and on video for it to be recognized as the classic that it is. And that's one of many. Movies and TV and animation in general need support by a media in the past that hadn't given it that kind of support. Believe it or not, I'm somebody who's been reading the trades like Variety and Hollywood Reporter since the 70s, and they didn't cover animation. They didn't even review animation. They reviewed the regular movies, the live action feature films, and regular TV shows. Animation is very, very rare to be covered at all by the trades. Now, that's not true today. We have Variety and Deadline Hollywood and others that cover it pretty well. But for years, animation's been this ignored separate part of the industry. As you know, they didn't give an Oscar for Best Animated Feature until 2001. That was after lobbying by people in the 90s when the Renaissance was on. Toy Story never got an Oscar nomination. Well, it might have for music or something, but because there was no place for animation in the big community of cartoons. So I do more than just what I've been telling you. I'm part of ASIFA Hollywood. That's ASIFA. And that's the group that does the Annie Awards here in California, which is the Animation Industries Awards. We've been honoring animators and TV episodes and things like that, and voice actors since like 1970, I believe. We have a big award ceremony that's streamed online. It's in February, and we're very proud of that. And so, I mean, I've just my whole life's been pushing animation, pushing it. One of my other side notes was that I grew up in the era where animation was perceived as for children only, and I never felt that way for a variety of reasons. And I didn't grow out of it. I didn't grow out of my love of animation as I grew up. So I preached the gospel that animation isn't just a children's medium, and that's one of my things. I'm not advocating for X-rated adult animation. I'm just saying that animation is for everybody, and that's one of the things that's really a through line through a lot of work that I've done, whether it's distributing anime or teaching or the books that I've written, even though they're about Hanna-Barbera and Looney Tunes and things like that. I stress that this is not a children's thing entirely. It's not, it's a medium. It's capable of so much entertainment. Can bring something to. If you love Scooby, and I know you do, if you love Scooby-Doo, it's touched you. You found something in it that you like, that you care about. I mean, I just know that I have that about Bugs Bunny. I have that about some of the great Disney features. I don't want to forget them. I want the merchandise. I want to have it around. It's something that's part of me and what made me what I am. And that's what's great about animation. It can do that.
Absolutely. And I'm curious as to how you go from just, having an interest in animation and writing about animation to getting dubbed a animation historian.
Well, I remember for years, in me doing this, let's say the 80s and 90s, I mean, I couldn't say to people, I'm a cartoon historian, I'm an animation historian. It was kind of embarrassing. It was like, well, what does that mean? I mean, what do you do for a living? But the thing is, somewhere in the last 15 years, or the 21st century or so, the 20 years, 22 years, I proudly admit it. I proudly say it, because if someone says, well, what do you do for a living? Well, I write books and I get paid. I consult to the studios about their animation libraries. Believe it or not, a lot of people who work for the studios don't know what they own. They don't know they own this. I do that a lot with Warner's. They're pretty good, though. They're pretty good at putting out most of their holdings, and they value Scooby. But and I teach, and that's why right now I'm full-time teaching and writing and blogging, and I make money from that too. And so everything I do is revolved around the history of animation, and so I can proudly say I'm an animation historian. I mean, it's not that no one else could do it. I have colleagues who could say the same thing, but it's definitely a rare breed. I also say when I was like I say in my teens, 20s, kind of what I'm doing now as for a living was the dream. I mean, can you imagine doing this? I remember thinking like that, and it took me my whole life to get here, but I got here. So I'm going to enjoy the next batch of whatever the next act is here, and have fun having that life I wanted all along.
What are the challenges of trying to uncover that history of animation?
Well, unfortunately, most studios, a rare exception being Disney, because they have a thing called the Disney Archives there, and most studios, Hanna-Barbera is almost notorious for throwing everything away. Once they made a film or TV show or whatever, the finished TV show was the end product. That was what they were making. So everything relating to the making of the show, the original sketches, whatever, the scripts, everything was tossed, Now, yes, luckily, there were several artists, young people who worked at Hanna-Barbera who realized, well, wait a minute, you're throwing this away, and they would dumpster dive, and so some of this stuff exists because people took it out of the trash. But that's kind of part of it is it's really hard to recreate. It's kind of like hard to put Humpty Dumpty back together again when they threw away all the pieces. So that's one of the tricks of it. So for an animation historian, you got to track down what you can track down by either primary sources or secondary sources, collectors, libraries, archives, animators who worked there at the time, which is now shrinking to a very small amount. It's doable, but it's very, very, it's tough. It's not easy. It was never considered an important medium to save and preserve, so, it's difficult. I will say that when I worked on my Hanna-Barbera book, Fred Seibert, must mention him. He ran Hanna-Barbera for a couple of years, I believe in the 90s, around the time when Cartoon Network started and that period. And when he was there, he realized that they didn't have any of their history. They had no artifacts, no merchandise. They had nothing. So he went in the 90s on a crazy campaign. He literally hired a person whose job it was to go to flea markets, and scour. The internet was just starting. eBay just literally started, to go to auctions, look for Hanna-Barbera merch. They then amassed quite a collection, and they also went looking for things like the original storyboards for the Scooby's pitch meeting and things like that. They found a lot of stuff. They bought it corporately, and they still own it. They still have it today. It's in Warner Brothers archives in these boxes in a giant warehouse that looks like something out of the last scene from Indiana Jones. But I was able to go into that warehouse and pull those boxes for my book. And I will say about that book, since I mentioned it, that I had the pleasure of going through all of those boxes, and it was my job. We had a professional photographer with me, and we set up a camera stand. And basically, we'd take a box down. The employees there, it was their job to give us the boxes, and we'd open a box, and I'd literally take out the first thing, and I'd say, "No, this is like some 1990s thing, and it's off model. Throw it over here. Oh my God, from 1963, this is cool." And I'd give it to so I was able to say, photograph this, photograph that. So I'm very proud of that book because I actually touched and was the one saying, yes, we're using that image. In every little picture in that book is, was directed by me. Like let's use this, let's use that. So, but it's hard, but it's a little easier now with the internet. It's a little easier now that more people recognize that animation is something it's important, and even the studios realize that it's a reason to keep a lot of this material now. They didn't do that back then.
And do you think that there's any capacity to have like a dedicated animation museum where some of those things might get displayed at some point?
Wouldn't that be great? That's been the dream of my group, Asifa Hollywood, for years, to do such a thing. And I've talked to people all around the country who have similar thoughts. I've been involved with museum exhibitions. One notably, I wish you could have seen, one at the Norman Rockwell Museum in upstate New York. It's a great museum devoted to the great painter Norman Rockwell, but they actually did several years ago. And again, on my shelf, and if I find it, if I see it, I'm going to pull it off, but it's somewhere in there. Oh, there it is. Hold on. I'm sorry I found it, but this was the catalog of the Hanna-Barbera architects, the architects of Saturday Morning. This was the catalog at the Norman Rockwell Museum. I think you can actually find this and buy it. And it's a wonderful, this is everything that was on exhibit, but I think there's even his Clue Club, one of the ripoffs of Scooby. Here's the Scooby, and of course, Scooby storyboards on display, and I wrote an article in here, but this is the catalog of the exhibit. But the thing is, the point is that there have been exhibits of Hanna-Barbera in museums. This is hopefully going to be seen somewhere. Um, the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures in California that just opened about a year ago, they have a great exhibit on animation, but it doesn't cover TV animation at all. But it does have a very good floor devoted to animation history. I mean, we're making inroads. George Lucas is opening a museum actually in California as well, that's dedicated to what he calls narrative art. But the word is out that narrative art to him means comics and cartoons and other things. And so I don't know yet how that museum's going to go, but small steps are happening towards the idea of making an animation museum. Um, it's not there yet, but if enough like-minded people will get together at some point, and it will happen. You know, when and where and exactly how. I've also been trying to. I've been trying to get together a theater, just a theater, to like be what I call a cartoon theater, a cartoon cinema that just exists and runs nothing but animation. That's like my dream, and in efforts of that dream, I one of the other things I do is I do lectures. I travel. In LA. I do a lot of screenings of animation on the big screen in different venues. So I get involved with festivals around the world. So there's things to do on the road to getting to that archive, that museum, and that cartoon theater. They exist in our mind and they exist in a reality, but they're just not all pulled together yet. They will be.
And I wanted to talk about this little mini book here. How did that idea come about? Because you said it was taken from the Hanna-Barbera Treasury.
I hope you weren't tricked or anything, and when you may have seen it online and bought it, and then it came out and it was this little teeny weeny nothing book. I mean, I don't know. That was I'm gonna foist blame and take credit. Actually, to be honest, I can't take much credit. What happened was the publishers, Insight Editions, really nice publishers who did the Hanna-Barbera book. They had the license to do books about Hanna-Barbera, and to be honest, they actually called me up and told me that. And they said, we had the rights to do books about Hanna-Barbera. What would you do? And I already had the very few books on Hanna-Barbera that existed, Bill and Joe's autobiographies. And there's a book called The Art of Hanna-Barbera by Ted Sennett. And then there's another book on Hanna-Barbera, which I don't see on my bookshelf, but it's by my friend Mike Mallory. And those were big art books. And I didn't like those two big art books because the artwork was what I call calendar art. It was like kind of stock publicity art. And I was more interested in seeing like really cool stuff like storyboards and merchandise. And there was so much cool stuff that existed. And I basically said that on the phone to them. I said, I'd like to do a big art book that was just nothing but the cool stuff of Hanna-Barbera. And then we'll write in it, who these characters are and about the studio and that kind of thing, and just keep it light. And that was exactly what they wanted, because they wanted the book out like immediately, and they wanted it out for Christmas, and it all had to be done very, very quickly. So the book I proposed was fit perfectly with what their plans were. The next year, they still had this license for a couple of years, so they were trying to figure out what else to do. And they did do a couple of other things. I'll not talk about that, and I wasn't involved with them. But one of the things was one day they literally called me up and said, look, we're going to just take some of the stuff you wrote about Scooby-Doo here, and we're going to just take some of the artwork that we got, that we acquired, that, you'd sent over and stuff. And I think some of it might be things that didn't make it in this book, but I could be wrong. I have to look at it again. And then basically they said, we're just going to put this together, and we're just going to do it. And they did it with three things you may or may not know. They did it with Scooby, they did it with the Flintstones, I believe, and they did it with Tom and Jerry. I feel like I see them on my shelf and I just can't remember the three books, but Scooby-Doo, Tom and Jerry, and I think the Flintstones. And they did them, these little mini books. And I think the thinking was they'd be what they call point of purchase, that they'd just be sitting on the counter when you go to Barnes and Noble or something, and then they're right there. And like you would just say, oh, I'll take this too. They call that point of purchase. And they put them out, and I had really nothing to do with them. I hate to say it like that. Whereas I had a lot to do with this, with this big one. They just had the rights to do whatever they wanted with the material they had. So they put those books out, and I hope that isn't disappointing you or anything. But it's very, that's just business, and it's what they did. And of course, they put my name on it, and of course, I'm happy they did it in some ways because I like the idea of it. Maybe if it had been more successful, they would have done a whole line of those or something. But anything that helps promote animation and gets it out there, or piques someone's interest. Maybe if some mom bought that for their kid, just for fun, that might pique their interest in reading more about Scooby-Doo, reading more about animation, looking for more books about animation, and anything that helps a proponent. I'll be honest, I don't think I made any money out of that. They might have sent me some tiny little check or something, like, just because, but there's no residuals, or I don't make any money on those books. So it's it's just a business decision that was out there. So that sounds so sad. I feel like I want to tell you I worked my heart out on that little book, and no, it wasn't like that. It was just sort of a, Taschen Books does that now. Those big giant Taschen books that are online. They also come out with mini versions of the same book or little parts of the book. So it's not an unusual thing in publishing. And look, it's Scooby-Doo helps the cause.
Absolutely. What is your favorite part about writing about the history of animation?
Well, my favorite part is the research, and my favorite part is knowing way more about the subject than I can ever get into a book. But that's the fun part. You I always felt like I really feel I know the subject because I know way more than I put in the book. And that's kind of a satisfying feeling. If somebody has a question that isn't about the villains of the Scooby-Doo episodes, no, but if somebody has a question about this topic, or why did this happen, or when did this happen, I pretty much know the answer. I'm talking mainly about the old classic days of old theatrical shorts. But the inner knowledge that you feel like you accomplished that, you're the expert on it, that's the best part about writing a book, about doing something. And also the Uber, I forgot the way you worded your question, but one of the best parts about doing a book is when a book comes out and it's published. I have to tell you, working on this was fun. Seeing the galleys, meaning the before it got printed, you see it as a PDF of how it's gonna lay out, how the layout works. I remember seeing the layouts for this. I thought, this looks cool. This looks really. And then I still remember, this was not my first book, but when I got one in the mail, when they sent me one, and I opened it up, and I started going through this book, and the feel of the paper and seeing it printed, this particular book blew me away, like none of my other books did. Maybe because it was mainly a picture book, but the actual physical book is gorgeous, and it's beautiful, and each page has got amazing stuff on it. And I'm like, wow, I saw every page. I wrote all these words, but this book is blowing me away. This book is blowing, it still does to this day. It's my favorite book in terms of the final product. This is my favorite book because it's beautiful. It's its own little work of art. But seeing when you finally get a book and it's published and you worked on it, you know it by heart. When you finally see it published, it's old news to you. But there's something about it finally being real that gives you a feeling that you just don't have.
And I wanted to talk about the cartoon research blog a little bit. How did that come to start?
Well, back in the old age, everything comes out of something else, back in the older days, in the 70s and 80s and whatever, there was one or two fanzines. There weren't many. I can think of only really two off the top of my head. One was really, really slick and professional, called Funny World by Michael Barrier. And another one was called Mind Rot by a friend of mine named David Mers in Minneapolis. And that one looked more like a real fanzine, like it was done at a print shop. And the other one looked like a magazine. And those are the two animation magazines that were around. And I always had it in my mind that I wanted to do an animation fanzine or a magazine. And at one point in my career that I left out from before was my job I moved to LA. I had a job with a small film distributor that was related to Landmark Theaters. And they started a little distribution company. And as part of that, they had the idea of doing a little animation magazine. And I said, whoa, I'm all for that. Let's do it. And they started it. And you may or may not know, and I'm not sure if you've seen it or not, but there is a magazine called Animation Magazine, and it exists and it's out there. And I think we'd call it a trade magazine. It's mainly a magazine that's aimed. I'm not sure who it's aimed at, but it's whether it's for fans or whatever. But they do a lot of articles about the upcoming movies and TV series and who the people are. It's nice. It's good. I like it. But that was the magazine. I was involved at the beginning of that magazine. It was called Animation Magazine. We started in 1987, and my boss was running it, and I was mainly the editor and writer, and it was not what I had in my mind for what an animation magazine should be. I had my own ideas. I still like my ideas, and I'm not sure if the magazine like my ideas ever came out. I had an idea for an animation magazine that would be really hip and would look really cool, so that if you went into Hanna-Barbera or any studio, it would be on their coffee table in the reception room, and you'd thumb through it, and you go, "Wow, I want to be in the animation business looking through this magazine." And I wanted to get that feeling out of a magazine. They didn't want to do that, and everything was done kind of the opposite of the way I wanted to do Animation Magazine in the beginning. It's gotten better, but in the beginning it was pretty routine in my mind. So that didn't happen, and I moved on from there, and Animation Magazine became what it became. And I've been a contributor to it throughout the years here and there. I'm still friendly with all the people involved with it. And then the internet came, and everyone was doing, in the very beginning, I'm talking 1999, 2000, people were starting up websites. There was no such thing as a blog yet, but websites. And I just thought, I decided that I was going to become a company at that point in time. I just decided that I'm going to call it Cartoon Research Company, and I don't know what that means, but it meant that I would do freelance work and do all kinds of, it just gave me a shingle, as they say. And I had a friend do a logo, and I made up cards and stationery, and I went out and got the URL for, cartoonresearch.com. I did that way back in like 1997 or something. Didn't really know what to do with it. And somewhere around 1999, 2000, I just started to want to futz with it and learn HTML, and learn a little bit about what to do with the computer. I started it as kind of a news site. And then I met up with a friend who was doing a fanzine called, his fanzine was called Animation Blast. And we both got together and we said, let's get together and do a news site. I think this was the year, I don't remember. I could figure it out in a minute, but it's something like 2003 or so. I think we started a blog, a website called Cartoon Brew, BREW, and we were partners on that, and we co-wrote and I co-wrote it for 9 years. It still exists today. 9 years into it, we ended up having disagreements about the direction and where it should go, and he was more muckraking and negative about the industry, where I was very positive and uplifting about what was going on in the history of animation and all that. So we butted heads on that, and we split. He got the thing. I had Cartoon Research. I still had the URL website for that. So I went back to Cartoon Research, and I turned it into a daily blog of animation history. And that was in the year 2013, I think. And been doing that as a hobby. You might see a little advertisement for something here and there. Nobody gives me any money. It's all a hobby. And it's like I said, it's my hobby. It's the thing I do for my own enjoyment, because it's the one place where I can control it. I can control the graphics, the way it looks, what articles I want to print. I moderate the comments. It's my world. Even though if I have other contributors, it's all part of the vision, and my contributors share my vision. And that's what makes it a hobby. But I find that it's been very useful, not just for me, but for everyone, students. I can check on what I call the back end WordPress. I can check how many people have read each post. And on a weekly basis, it's modest. I'll just leave it at that. But I will say that when I go back into the 7, 8, 9 years, the posts from the first years, the second years, third years, they've got 25,000, 50,000, 150,000, 200,000 views. I mean, it's insane how many views they have as the years have gone on. It's because people find that article. They're searching Google for some obscure piece of information, and luckily, one of the blog posts from Cartoon Research will show up, and they'll go. And that's been happening, I'm sure, with thousands of people, and that's why the numbers are so big on some of the older pieces. So we put them all out there like notes in a bottle, and eventually people will see them. We have a lot of daily followers as well. We are living in a different era, and so what I do is I have to usually I have to promote the latest blog post every single day on my Cartoon Research Facebook page and several other Facebook pages and Twitter. I don't know if I can get into all the other things, and until they become the dominant ones like TikTok and even Instagram. But I'm Facebook. We have a lot of people reading Facebook still, and Twitter. We got the word out there as well. But that's how I got involved with doing that. It's really just an outgrowth. It's what I said before. It's like I needed a place to put all of this information that I was accumulating on a daily basis since we did the Book of Mice and Magic in 1980. So it's a never-ending thing. And what's great is with the internet now, last 15 years. Almost every day still, people keep coming up with bits and pieces. We found films that we considered lost in 1980 and 1990 in the year 2. Now they exist again because of the worldwide network of people who are looking for the things that we're saying, hey, we can't find this. Where is it? And so we put the word out. So it's become a great tool for research. And, there needs to be a place where somebody's moderating it. Some of the Facebook pages are just Wild West crazy, with people posting anything that they want. That's fine. My site's more, I don't want to say intelligent, but it's more for, we try to be the paper of record. We try to be the blog of record. We like to think you can depend on any information that we post. And if you can't, write in and we'll fix it. And we have the comments below. And if somebody's looking for certain information on a certain film or a character or a studio or something, they'll probably find it on Cartoon Research, or at least a starting place. And of course, I get a lot of email and a lot of questions from individual people. It takes up too much, unfortunately, of my time. I have no assistant, but I try to answer questions if they're easily answerable, or I'll point in a direction. Oh yeah, write to this person or something, and try to solve those mysteries, because I'm trying to do what I would have wanted back when I was in my teen years and was looking for this info, and if there was somewhere I could have gone to find it, so I sympathize with everyone looking for information. I'm here to help.
And I just want to move it a bit more Scooby specific here. In your mind, what has been the historical significance of Scooby-Doo? How has it changed the atmosphere of animation?
Well, Scooby-Doo has sort of become the quintessential TV cartoon. I haven't thought about it, so I don't have a list in front of me, but the Flintstones, Yogi Bear, even in the early days, late these days, SpongeBob, The Simpsons, Scooby-Doo. I mean, that's the company Scooby keeps. These are the iconic tent poles of television animation. What is a TV cartoon? I think everything I just named would be the absolute things you'd have to show. And if you're illustrating the point of what would be a TV cartoon, Scooby-Doo is absolutely there. In Scooby, of all of them, represents Saturday morning cartoons, not the Flintstones. That was a primetime series. The Scooby is pretty much the only one that I just named of Saturday morning. I'd have to think about it some more about what would really be. The main reason for that is the longevity of Scooby-Doo. Scooby was there. Scooby is Saturday morning cartoons. So that's the historical, context and legacy of the Scooby-Doo is for that period of time in our pop culture history when we had a thing called Saturday morning cartoons. Scooby-Doo is that representative.
And I'm interested in how you came to be called up for the Scooby-Doo Where Are You Now special that they did.
Well, the again, not that exciting breaking the magic answer is that when you get to a certain status, and in your career, and you've done books and you have that little mini book out there and you've done a book on Hanna-Barbera, um, places like that will call me out of the blue and say, would you be interested in being on camera? Luckily, I live near where they were shooting it too, so wasn't even an inconvenience. Weirdly enough, I have a lot of connections at Warner Brothers and Warner Brothers Animation and all the people over there, but that had nothing to do with it. It literally was the producers of this independently made special finding, probably going to Amazon, seeing, oh, this guy Jerry Beck would be good to get. Let's see if we can get him. So that's probably what happened, in that case. And that was fun. It turned out to be a very good. The people doing it were really nice and really cared and really loved Scooby-Doo. And I thought what they were doing was pretty clever, having it be a live action animation thing. I didn't even know how I fit into it, but I just went there and I answered a few questions. The rest is animation history.
And what kind of questions were they asking? Because obviously, they had to probably leave a lot on the cutting room floor.
No, you know what? They basically asked me the kind of question you just asked. They asked about Scooby's historical place in it and things around Scooby, which was exactly the kind of question I can answer. Uh, you know, what do I think of it, or where does it fit, and you know, uh, is Scooby important, and all that kind of thing. So, I have those answers. I have answers to those questions.
And I think the last question that I have for you here is, why do you think that a cartoon about a mystery-solving dog has held up for over 50 years?
Well, everyone loves a mystery, and they love to solve a mystery, and everybody wants to be able to identify with the people trying to solve that mystery. And in the case of the Scooby Crew, um, the in the case of Mystery Incorporated, you've got your. I'm not may not even be good at describing the characters. I was gonna say the egotistical, uh, guy. You have the pretty girl. You've got the brain. You've got the slacker. You've got the dog. You've got all these things. You pick one. You either know somebody like that, or you are like that, or you want to be like that. So it's what I call easy access show. You watch it and you can immediately pick up on, the character that you like and what they're into immediately. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it just hit the right buttons, and it's became, iconic is the word. I use it over and over again, but it's an absolute part of the fabric of Saturday morning cartoons, even and just pop culture in general. And whether you're looking at it, taking it seriously as a child or even a grown up, or whether you're looking at it as silly, but it's earnestly silly. It's honestly silly. It's not something to really make fun of. Scooby in its early days was made fun of by some in the animation community because of the animation was limited animation. It's not Disney style, but but now it owns that. It owns limited animation. It is the limited animation TV series. It is the 60s/70s TV series. that has not gone away. It's part of our families. It's part of our childhoods. So Scooby is there. So the question, so the answer to the question, Scooby-Doo, where are you? Is that he's there. He's here. He's in our minds at all times.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time today. Do you have any recent projects or websites, social media channels that you want to promote?
cartoonresearch.com. You can look for me on Cartoon Research on Facebook as well. And I don't know. I don't even know anymore. I'm teaching so much I can't think about all the other things I'm doing. But I'm you'll see me on all kinds of videos and upcoming documentaries, and tune in with me. And I make appearances everywhere. So keep watching cartoons.
And that concludes today's episode. Another huge thank you to Jerry Beck for taking the time to chat with me. For more Scooby content, be sure to check at Unmasked SD on Instagram or on TikTok at Unmasked SD. You can also always find the podcast at unmaskedsdpodcast.com. If you like this episode and want to hear more, also make sure to check those social media channels or the website. Or you can listen to older episodes wherever you like to get your podcast fix. Thanks for listening, and keep an ear out for the next episode. Scooby-Dooby-Doo!